Hi everyone, it's Ashley. So last time I talked about how I have different things going on with me, and one of them was neurofibromatosis type 1, and I figured that I should take some time to explain what that is and what it means, because it's not a very common disease and it's not a very common thing people know about. So neurofibromatosis, or NF for short, is a genetic disease, but it sometimes occurs through mutation of the cells. So when a baby is forming, or when a fetus is forming, it starts off with like one cell that splits into two, that splits into four, that splits into eight, you know, how it grows. And like when it's at like 16 cells, then it's going to go into, I can't do math. It's going to go into like 16 times 16. And at that point, one of the cells might mutate and have, you know, the NF gene. And so then like a certain amount of cells has those genes while other cells do not, because only a small percentage of them mutated with it. And that's called mosaic NF. That is the kind that I have. And so there are three types of NF. There's NF1, NF2, and let's see if I can pronounce this right, schwannomatosis. Schwannomatosis is my best guess. I have not heard it said out loud. I have only read it. So if I mispronounce it, my apologies. But so NF type 1, and keep in mind, I'm not a scientist. I don't know. I'm not a professional. This is just from what I understand from the booklets and things that I've read, from the Wikipedia articles, from the Children's Tumor Foundation informational site. This is just what I know. So NF type 1 is a type of NF that affects, so all three affect the nervous system. They affect the Schwann cells in the nervous system, which I believe is the protective lining along the nerves, and it causes benign tumors to grow called neurofibromas. So sometimes these can be microscopic, tiny, but they can have a big impact, and sometimes they can be huge and be very disfiguring and upsetting. So in NF type 1, they can grow anywhere along the nervous system, including the brain, the spinal stem, anywhere that your nerves are, which is everywhere. And it can affect you in a myriad of different ways. Like if you have them growing around your heart, it could affect your heart palpitations and like cause a lot of heart issues. If you have them growing around your, around your lungs, you could have breathing issues, like stuff like that. I have NF type 1. So they primarily affect where my groin is and my bladder region. So it makes it so that I cannot feel when I have to use the restroom, or when I have to pee, really. And it also makes it so that some things I can feel in excess, like when my muscles tighten on my lower back. It causes it to add pressure to the nerves that are along to the neurofibromas that are along my nerves, causing me extreme pain. So it just depends, luck of the draw, on how it affects you. It doesn't follow a pattern. NF type 2 is primarily localized in the brain. So the symptoms of those that you see are like cataracts, or like, hearing problems, or like motor functions, muscle loss a lot of times. A lot of times they will check your eyes for little freckly things called cafe au lait spots, which appear in all types of NF. They just look like freckles, but some of them can be big. I think my biggest one is about like this big. But yeah, they just it affects your brain. NF type 2 affects your brain, which can obviously cause a lot of problems. It can cause sight loss, hearing loss, motor function issues, all that jazz. And it's primarily first seen in early adulthood, while with NF type 1, it's seen when you're first born or within the first 10 years of life. I was diagnosed when I was 11, so I was just outside that bracket, but my symptoms were occurring before I was 11. When I started to be about 9 is when I started to show my symptoms. But I had cafe au lait spots since I was born, which everybody just thought were regular freckles until I started to show symptoms. And thankfully my doctor was like, hey, I think that this might be this disease, like let's look into it. And then all the symptoms fit. And so I was diagnosed. And then another doctor later on was like, no, she doesn't have it, because a lot of times with NF type 1 and type 2, you see learning disabilities go along with it. And I did not have a learning disability aside from ADHD, but I was getting good grades. And so the doctor was like, oh, like, no, she doesn't have NF. So we got a blood test, and it turned out that I did have mosaic NF type 1. So then Schwannomatosis, still don't know how to pronounce it. It's the most rare and it's the most recent. It affects about 1 in 40,000 people. And it's primarily associated with pain. So the more pain you have, I guess, the more likely you're to be diagnosed with that type. I don't know a whole lot about it because there's not a whole lot to know about it. Other than the typical NF stuff. It affects the Schwann cells in your nerves. It affects, you know, the neurofibroma tumors that grow that are benign. That's all I pretty much know about it. With NF type 2, you are more likely to have a lower life expectancy because it is in your brain, and it oftentimes the neurofibromas do become cancerous, although they are benign when they're labeled neurofibromas. And cancer in your brain is not the best place to have cancer. And even just regular tumors in your brain, not the best place to have tumors. But NF type 1 is a lowered life expectancy, but not nearly as much. A lot of people with type 1 live long, healthy lives. But the treatment for NF is just tumor removal, or there's some people trying chemotherapy, but that's not totally recommended in all cases. But, you know, when your tumors are microscopic, it could be like if you throw a handful of salt into a dirty room and then say, pick up all the pieces of salt, like, it's not going to happen. It's too wide of an area and too small of what you're trying to find. So the treatment is limited. And the effects can be from mild, which I feel like my effects are somewhat mild because I'm very lucky, to very extreme, very debilitating symptoms and issues that you can have with it. So if you'd like to donate to help fund research and treatments for NF research, you can go to the Children's Tumor Foundation, which I will try to put a link in the description below for that. And it could really help a lot of people. I know that they've already made great strides, but there's still a lot more to go. But yeah, so that's what NF is. So when I talk about my NF, I'm mostly talking about my neurofibromas that make it so that I cannot tell when I have to pee and that cause pain in my lower back. There's also a myriad of other things that I can just guess affect it. I don't know. A lot of people in my family have really bad cramps. I have semi-bad cramps, so I'm like, they could be worse because of my NF is blocking it. They could be better, but my NF makes it worse. You know, there's a lot of things. I cannot have my own children. I'm afraid that I could not survive a pregnancy due to where my NF is localized. Or I could, you know, pass it along to my children and they may not be quite as lucky as I am in how it affects them. So that's a decision that I had to make. But yeah, this video went on longer than I meant it to, but I just wanted to give a quick rundown of what NF is and how it can affect people. So yeah, I hope you all have a great day, and I hope you all learned something from this.